Okay, I am going to try this again. Let me see here. Okay, I think we had the microphone and everything working great. I went back and played the video back again, and it seems to be working all right. And I switched to a new browser. Hopefully, Chrome will play better since Chrome is owned by Google, which owns YouTube. Okay. Well, hopefully, some of those people, or at least one of the people who were signed on earlier, will come back. So this video here is really in response to a question that I got on a video that I posted probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and people are still watching these videos that I posted years ago on acting tips and things like that. And I really appreciate that. It shows that the content is something that's valuable and people are enjoying it, and that's great. So I'm going to respond to a person who posed this really unique question. And what she was struggling with, I will pull up the question, in fact, because it was a good one. She was asking about how to be emotional in a scene when she is kind of blocked. Basically, what happened is she had someone in her acting class who basically said, like, here's the exercise. I'll read it. She says, I have a question I faced during my acting class. We were asked to do emotional acting as some of our loved one, like a brother or a friend or whoever, has died in some accident or terrorist attack, and his body is in front of us. When I was practicing it in my living room, she says, when I was practicing it in my living room, I was able to get into the character with emotions, but when I was asked to do it in class, it went completely flat. I could not get into any emotions or any feelings. I couldn't understand why it happened. Please help me out with it. Okay, so first of all, I'm honored that you would even ask me to respond. You know, obviously you have an acting coach who you're working with, and I'm glad that you've seen my videos and like what I've said enough to come to me with your question. So this was a little difficult because I don't really know that I could give her an exact answer to what she was struggling with without having been there and see what was happening. And then I could coach her and ask her some questions and, you know, maybe post some exercises for her to do that she could then be able to sort of narrow down why she's not getting connected. And that's really what would be the right answer. But without that, I can at least guess, because I've seen people deal with this before. I've dealt with it early in my career. And how do you face that? And this is an important issue because honestly, like, when you're on set or on stage, somebody's hired you, they're paying you to do this, you have to portray these emotions and make them real. That's when it matters most. And sometimes it's like you might do really great in the audition and it could be an emotional scene. Like, you know, let's say she was auditioning and that was her scene at home that she practiced and it was great. And then the cameras are rolling, they call action, or this curtain goes up and you step out on the stage and now you have to do it under all of that pressure. And that is really sometimes kind of a scary idea. Like, what if I can't do it when it matters most? And so to be able to do that, you really need to understand that being in the moment and having an emotional reaction is something that requires you to let go of all of the other things around you and be connected to the situation that you are in with this character. And you got to forget that there's a director and a camera and all that stuff, especially in a big deal kind of emotional scene like this, where you're looking at your dead family member's body and it was a tragic death. and probably maybe a surprise, I mean, anything tragic like that is very sudden. How do you get to the point where you can let all those other things go and be real and invest and let the emotions flow? Well, there's two things that I would suggest. Number one, you need to be prepared for that moment because you know it's coming. That means that you may not be playing around and chatting it up with your other castmates and on backstage or before the scene. You have to spend some time alone and breathe. You need to spend some time just breathing. Deep, slow, long breaths, and allow, because there's something about breathing that allows you to kind of connect your emotions and your body and your mind all together. It doesn't mean that you're going to get emotional. It just means that you can kind of connect to those emotions, and all of our baggage of life kind of slowly fades off into the distance when we just breathe, right? Breathing is so important about just connecting to your body and to your mind and to your emotions. After you've done that for a minute, and I actually just did this yesterday because I had a screen test for hosting a TV show. And, I'd gotten up early, went to the gym and, got showered and everything ready. And then I'm driving up there and I got a little bit of that buzzing energy from, working out. And I'm like, man, I'm trying to calm down and get myself grounded. And I couldn't really feel it as I was going through what the scenario was for this host thing. And so as I'm driving, I just literally stopped everything, put hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, and started breathing really deeply and doing nothing but just driving the car. Like, just keep it perfectly in the lanes, make sure I'm checking all my mirrors, breathing deep and just driving. And I kept doing that for like 5 or 10 minutes on the busy freeway until I finally got to the point where I felt like my mind wasn't racing around and I could just be. So first of all, you got to find that way to get yourself into that state of mind where you're just being. And then once you get into the scene, maybe there is no emotional reaction instantly. Maybe it's just like, well, I don't know what to do, which is a totally legitimate response. I mean, if I were to tell somebody, hey, here's a phone call, your older sibling, your dad, your grandma, they just died. Like, the first reaction most people would have would be shock and surprise and kind of denial. They would kind of think to themselves, what am I, is this real life? What are you talking about? Like, so that numbness, that like complete, like blindsided emptiness is a totally legitimate response. And the thing is everybody thinks that if it's somebody who's dead and it's a tragic moment that you're supposed to instantly just get what and start crying and get emotional. And that's not really how it happens in real life. There's this instant of like, what are you saying? What just happened? Did I hear that correctly? Like, there's a disbelief that happens when something that serious comes into your life so suddenly. So accept that fact that maybe she's just feeling numb and she has no emotions. Then you need to work that into the scene. And like, so her first response might be, well, you know what, hold on, I gotta finish making lunch for the kids, or wait a second, let me finish filing these papers before what. It's like sometimes people will just to sort of compensate for this shock of some emotional tragedy that just got thrown into your life, especially something connected to a loved one. Their first response might be like, well, I gotta do what I gotta do though first before I can deal with that. And so as she's doing that and people are trying to say, no, you don't understand, calm down, then suddenly, like, it's the emotions are starting to build because she's not sure what to do. And so accepting that and working with whatever your real reaction is will help you get to the emotional reaction, right? So you stay with what is happening internally, what you're really feeling, but then you're doing it in the character and in the scene. So it's the story doesn't change. It's just your reaction isn't immediate. It's just kind of like you have to process it. And then as you start going through it and the scene builds and the characters keep going back and forth with your lines, I think that eventually those emotions will come as long as you connect to whatever you really feel and you allow that to drive the scene or your lines and your responses and reactions to this scenario. So I think that a lot of times as actors, we have this idea of like, this is what it's supposed to be, this preconceived notion of what this character has to do in this scene. But then when the time comes, the camera rolls, you step on the stage, you're not feeling that. It's just not clicking. And so what we have to do is then somehow find what we are feeling and allow that to drive the scene, knowing what's going to happen is inevitable because it's already scripted, right? We already know what people are going to say and do. So that continual process of the reality keeps getting thrown into your from your imagination as the lines and as the scene progresses will then force you to take those emotions that you're feeling or lack thereof and respond in kind. So you just keep that realism going. And sometimes that might get you mad because you're kind of angry that you don't feel anything for this, which is a perfectly legitimate response. You work with that. Then suddenly your lines come out angry because you're like, I'm not, I should be really sad, but I'm not, you know? And again, that's a real reaction that some people have when faced with tragedy. They might get angry because maybe they didn't get to say goodbye, or the last thing they said to that person was, oh man, I'm so sick of dealing with you. I wish you weren't in my life. You know, it could be something that they then, once that reality hits them, suddenly their backstory is like they're angry about the death of this loved one because they don't want to end that relationship the way it ended. So again, like emotions, you can't necessarily steer them in any specific direction. So you have to accept them and allow them to steer you in the moment and make it real. Now, sure, maybe your director or whatever will say, okay, I really want this to be like this, you know, and that might happen in, you know, a film because you get a few takes and the director sees it and they want to do something different because they're trying to craft the story the way they want. But generally on stage, if you're being authentic and real, first of all, nobody can do anything about it because it's live, it's happening. You know what I mean? You can't undo it. And the second is like, if those thank you. Oh, you're back. Cool. If those emotions are genuine and are real, then more than likely your director is going to be after the show's over and the curtain goes down, the director's notes are going to be, oh my gosh, that scene, I'd never imagined it that way. It was so great tonight. And tomorrow night it might be different, and that's okay because you can't recreate something that already happened. You know, it's that moment in time is gone. Thank you, Nicola. And yeah, please, if you have questions about anything, you guys, please jump in on that chat. I see there's 2 people watching. Thank you, and thanks for the thumbs up. So another thing about this idea of like how to get over an emotional block as an actor, so we are living life from one moment to the next, and sorry, that's my stomach growling. I just ate. The interesting thing about moments is that they come and go so instantly, right? They linger a little bit, you know, if it's, you know, really an emotional moment or something very memorable, but they come and go just like that. But that's what acting in life is made of, these moments that come and go. But the impression that a moment leaves goes on and on and on for a long time. Like if you had some really great experience on a date, once that date is over and you say your goodbyes and, you know, you go your separate ways, you might still be smiling about that moment, that time together for an hour or 2 or 3, or maybe even days if you really are falling in love. And that's just a moment. You can't recreate it, but it has an effect that lingers depending on how much that moment affects you emotionally, right? Emotions we remember. And so if you're trying to recreate something that you felt like the opening night or whatever, a good example I want to give is for a play that I did in Dallas, right? I did a play. It's The Sound and the Fury, right? Famous William Faulkner novel that was adapted into a play by Eric Inn, a playwright from the Bay, San Francisco. And it was a world premiere, right, of this show. And I played multiple characters, and one of them was a preacher, right? So I had this scene where I have this really nice monologue and dialogue back and forth with this woman who's a maid, and I'm playing a preacher, and I'm wearing this really cool vintage suit from like the 20s or the 30s, and I'm talking about this like metaphorical idea of this lamb on a tree, kind of a very sort of romanticized sermon. And one night while I'm doing this scene, and we have this live person who's doing like sound effects with different musical instruments and percussion and things. One night while I'm doing this scene, for some reason or another, before that, I was reading something that suddenly made that scene very like emotional for me. And as I'm going through this dialogue, I started to tear up, and it just became very emotional and passionate. Sometimes when you get emotional, your throat opens up and your voice gets deeper, and you speak from a very sensitive place, and that started to happen, right? And afterwards, the actress, the guy who was doing the sound effects, the director, everybody, the notes were like, Danor, that scene, they were like all crying, applauding and telling me how amazing it was. I never did it again like that. It was just that one night where somehow those lines really spoke to me and to my heart. And I was okay with that. It wasn't like I wanted to make it that way every time so I could get applause or something, because the problem is if you try to recreate a moment that happened yesterday, 2 weeks ago, in rehearsal, before opening night, you can't exactly do that because that moment already came and went. The lasting impression is still with you, but you can't. You'd have to have a time machine. You'd literally have to be able to go backwards in time to make that moment happen again exactly the way it did. And our problem is that we sort of force ourselves into this box by thinking, well, we have to recreate this perfect moment that we had in rehearsal, or that we felt like while we were, practicing our lines in the mirror, or, at home before the audition, and you can't ever do that because you don't have a time machine. So what you have to do, sorry, I don't want to kick the mic stand and make a bunch of noise. What you have to do is allow this moment to be what it should be and real. And it's sometimes a little harder at an audition or when the cameras are rolling and everything. But if you've done your preparation work and you recognize that this moment is going to come and go, and I'm getting a little emotional myself. What if it's a sense memory? Yeah, okay. Let me respond to that in just 1 second, Nicola. One of the things that you can use as a tool to allow those emotions and those moments to be real at the audition, or at the the climax of the play, the final night of the show, or when the camera rolls for that third take, again, and after 2 or 3, 4 times, is you almost have to, as an actor, be in love with the moment, because that's what life is. It's all these moments that come and go. We come and go into each other's lives, and you can't bring them back. You can't bring that loved one back. You can't bring that date night back. You can't bring that that time that you spent with your father before you left the home and you were on your own back. right? So you have to really love and savor the moment in time that you have, the right now. So then when you're at the audition, when you're, when you're rolling on that third or fourth take of this scene, or you're at that, that closing night of the show, which is sometimes emotional because it's closing night. Let's say before that, um, allow yourself to do all of the work, the prep work, the breathing, the investment in the moment, the allowing of your emotions to go where they want. But then when you feel like you're not quite there, just remember this moment is going to leave. So whatever that emotion is that you feel, love it, because at least you're there and you're able to feel it. And at that time, while you're in that audition or while you're doing that take, you know, it's like this means everything to you and to me as an actor. If that means everything to you because you know it's fleeting, it's going to disappear, then suddenly that emotion is amplified. It is magnified, and it becomes more than what it just is, a fleeting moment. It becomes a moment that matters. So in some ways, as an actor, what we have to do when we're auditioning or whatever the case, one of those scenarios that I discussed already, we have to just embrace and completely allow ourselves to emotionally savor and invest in that moment in time and whatever those emotions may be. And that will, I think the audience can feel that. I really do. And that because the more you love that moment, whatever the emotion is, the more they love it and feel that it has meaning and weight and value. And that's I think sometimes what we have to do to create it when we don't feel like it's there. We just have to love the fact that we are there. Okay, so Nicola, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Nicola Baranov, sounds like you're from Russia. That's cool. What if it's a sense memory? Okay, so you're saying, what if you're in a scene and you're using some sense memory from your past to help you get to the emotional present, right? Like, so let's say you're getting married. This is the person whose question I'm answering. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Ashish? Yeah. If it's a sense memory, then really that, I think, for you, for the most part, is just to try to help be a catalyst to help you get there. I've done that before. I'll listen to music and kind of like that has an emotional tone that matches the scene beforehand so I can and think about something. But there's a bit of a, oh, thank you. Excellent. There's a bit of a trap in sense memory, I think, that from at least from my experiences, is that like a memory is something that's kind of so sacred and that we have our own sort of point of view on that memory. A lot of times it's going to make us do the exact same thing every time. And then at some points in time, it just doesn't help you. It doesn't get you there. And so it's a great way to get you started. But then I think you have to let go of the sense memory and invest in the now, the present moment, because it would not be good as an actor. We always have to be listening and sort of in the moment and paying attention. And if you're so busy in your memories, then sometimes you're not listening and staying in the moment and staying with the scene. And so that's the sense memory thing is, I think, a great tool as a prep work to get you there. But I don't think it's something that you want to use during the take or on the stage all the time, because you're going to end up sort of being redundant and then maybe running out of fuel in your tank once it starts to fall short. So, okay, there's a Ashish who asked the question initially, has also said this. A few artists suggest that to get into an emotion, try to remember personal tragedies. Yeah, that's sense memory. But such trick cannot be used every time. Exactly. As we become used to it, Yeah. I saw a few people, pluck up their hair. Really, like pull their hair just to get like the pain. Like, well, yeah, I mean, if that works for you, that's okay. If you're a really good, hardworking actor, you might, be bald after a few shows. But I do think the sense memory thing is a great exercise for young actors to get them to understand that they do have a wealth of emotional life inside of them, and that they can draw on that well. But I think you're right, absolutely, that you can't just depend on that, because what happens is it becomes kind of an old bag of tricks, and you don't continue to grow and learn and stay fresh with your acting. Sorry, I'm just running out of moisture in the throat there. So, is there any other questions that you guys have about this? I mean, getting over an emotional block is an important part of kind of graduating to the next level as an actor, and it really requires some experience. Really, for me, and as you continue to act over time, no problem. Thank you, Nicola, and welcome. I think over time, what you'll begin to do is recognize that you have your own wealth of life to live, right? And this kind of like, I'll finish off this with this, like the sense memory thing. A lot of times people like will keep going back to their childhood memories and those, sort of things that happened in their real life when they were young to try and pull some emotions out. But, as actors, every day of our life is an opportunity for us to gain experience and to build a reservoir, a well to draw from. Oftentimes we forget that even doing mundane things gives us experience that we can use at some point in time when we need it. There's always some way to connect to something in a character if you've been really living your life. Like honestly, fully emotionally invested in what you do every single day. I'm not one of these people who thinks that actors should just be all about acting. I think you need to really try to live a full life. I think it's kind of crazy for a person who's like, for example, this is maybe an extreme example, but for a person who's never had children, it would be a lot more difficult for them to play a mother or a father than someone who has. Because there's just things that happen with having kids that you just don't experience and understand any other way until you've had them. And you could say that about a whole lot of other things, right? I mean, but for example, let's say you're a race car driver. You may not have to actually go out and race a car to know what it feels like to do something that is like really thrilling and puts you on the edge of your ability to safely like accomplish the task, right? And that's a dangerous thing. So like, maybe it is like about, okay, well, I did ride a roller coaster once, or I went swimming in a river that was, flowing really fast, and oh my gosh, I slipped and I remember that moment where I felt like I might drown. Okay, so like you got to be out doing stuff and really remembering the feelings that life gives you as you really go out and live it. And then when you're reading a character or a scene or an audition side, always figure out like, what have I done that this reminds me of? And what did that feel like? What were my thoughts and things like that? And then that informs you, that gives you that well to pull from, emotional well of feelings and stuff, that so that you're not faking it and you're not always like going, well, what happened when I was a kid that reminds me of this? Every single day in all of our lives, we should be living in a way that we fully embrace and hold on to what life has to offer, because that's our job as actors, is to put that on the screen for other people. So anyway, thank you, ladies, for coming. I don't know if Ashish is a lady. I think it might be a man, actually. But it sounds like I have an international audience, which is great. So that's all. Unless there's any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and end this stream, and hopefully this video will help some other people as well. Okay, thanks. And are you from India? Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of great acting and filmmaking going on over there in India, and India, they have a very unique style to their acting as well. So, I think that is something you could probably teach us a lot about what they do over there. So, yeah, hopefully this helps you, and good luck in your endeavors and your auditions. Take care, guys. See ya.